Okay. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you can all hear me. We're all getting better at this technology. Listen, we'd like to welcome you all today to the second session of the Study Queensland Global Webinar Series. For those who don't know me, my name is Shannon Willoughby and I'm the Executive Director of Study Queensland at Trade Investment Queensland. The purpose of these Study Queensland webinars is to provide market-specific information on current policies relevant to international education and training providers. Today we're in focus on Korea, and we have two speakers here today who will discuss opportunities and provide information to you all about market re-entry strategies in a post-COVID-19 world, or in a new world and a new way of doing things. Before I hand over to our speakers, some general Zoom housekeeping. Your videos are off and your microphones are muted, so please keep your questions in the Q&A box, to the Q&A box, and we can look at these during the webinar and we will endeavour to respond. If we don't get to all of your questions, note that we will be doing some follow-up afterwards as well. Please note that this webinar is also being recorded, so for those who couldn't attend, we'll have the option to be able to share and showcase this webinar afterwards. And yeah, please enjoy. But let me introduce you to our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Queensland Trade Investment Commissioner, Mr. Daniel Kim. Daniel has over 20 years experience advising on trade and investment deals between Australia and Asia. And prior to his appointment as Commissioner, Daniel had a long career in transaction and recruiting and restructuring at KPMG, where he held a number of leadership roles, including Head of Korea Business Practice. He is a member of the Australia-Korea Business Council and a recipient of the Ministerial Citation in Korea for his contribution to the bilateral relationship. Daniel, I'm now going to hand over to you to have a chat.
Terrific. Thank you, Shannon. And good afternoon to all. Let me start by thanking Shannon and the team at Study Queensland for the invitation to Olivia and myself to present today. We also want to thank you for all your efforts to organise the webinar. But of course, a shout out to all of those of you, our friends and partners across the state who have made the time to join the webinar. We know there are many of these going on at the moment, so even if you are suffering from some fatigue, we greatly appreciate you dialing in for this one. It is great, and it's very encouraging to see so many of you respond to this webinar today. I think we've had, over 100 positive RSVPs, and it's great to see such a diverse group and all of the subsectors represented. Participation across the state. So look, it is indeed very encouraging. There are many familiar names on the list, but equally there are many new ones. So look, hopefully today, will be an opportunity for those that we haven't met, for you to get to know us a little bit better. And for those of you that haven't reached out to us yet in TIQ Korea, I certainly encourage you to do so in the coming weeks and months. Let me kick things off. In terms of our time today and the agenda, I'll cover off the first two sections. I'll provide the latest update on COVID-19 and its impacts in Korea. I'll touch on some of the Korean student enrolments, the latest statistics there for Queensland. But I also want to just touch on, what our strategy has been and what our focus will be in the weeks and months ahead, and really hopefully we can then align with many of you and your strategies as you recut them in this sort of post pandemic world. Olivia will then touch on the Korean government's response for the education sector, and touch on some of the opportunities and challenges, I think, for many of you going forward. But look, let me just say, I think, before we start, is that I do want to acknowledge the collective efforts from our colleagues at Study Queensland, but indeed many of you in really pivoting resources during this extremely and extraordinarily challenging time. I think there, as difficult as it's been, I think there is much to be proud of, particularly in terms of the care for students, and in particular the international students and the Korean students. We've been very encouraged by the way that Queensland has responded. I mean, in terms of Korea and engaging with Korea, I mean, one of the fundamental things is sincerity, and being very sincere about how you engage, and that's equally the case for in international education and training. So I really encourage you to continue to put the students at the core of your focus. How they feel during this time will live long in their memories, and there's no doubt that we can do a lot to enhance our brand and our reputation based on how we look after these students during this time. So let me start actually with kind of where I want to finish, and that is actually just to say that TIQ Korea, we do remain committed to working very closely with you to try to minimize the impacts of this pandemic where possible. But arguably, where we can assist, I think more so, is around helping position you and plan for the recovery. So again, for those of you that haven't reached out to Olivia in the past, I certainly encourage you to do so, after this webinar and in the weeks and months ahead. So so this is TIQ Korea, and that's again a photo of the team, quite a small team in Korea, and Olivia is again who you'll hear from shortly. She's my BDM focused on international education and training in Seoul. I'll introduce her in a little bit more detail in just a moment. I want to start actually by just touching on the strategic importance of Korea to Queensland, and what's incredible is that it continues to increase. And so before we talk about the international education and training sector, I think it's important, just by way of context, to remind everyone that Korea is actually Queensland's third largest merchandise trading partner, with two-way trade, the value of that being in excess of $12 billion last year. Our exports last year, the total value was $9 billion, which has actually doubled in the last 5 years. So it's quite an incredible story. It happens to coincide with my appointment, but of course I can't take credit for all of it, no, but only just some of it. But nonetheless, it is, jokes aside, an incredible story. On the investment, I'm pleased to say that also in the last few years, we've been able to really move the needle on investment. And it's not just investment from Korea in our traditional pillars, but in some of the new emerging sectors in Queensland, which is also very exciting, and again, a key focus for our team in the months ahead. In terms of tourism, of course, Korea is also an important source market. Prior to the pandemic, I mean, the numbers for Korea into Queensland was trending up, which was a sort of bucking the trend which was happening across the country. But what's terrific about, of course, our Korean tourists and travelers is that they tend to stay for longer, and they tend to spend more than most other markets. They're also very respectful, of our environment. So again, another great source of importance for Queensland out of Korea. Last, but certainly not least, of course, is our international ed sector, and incredibly important to Queensland. Last year we attracted over 7,000 students, and again I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail later. But I think the context here is, of course, that even in recent days, where we've seen China make some unilateral decisions on the trade front with barley and beef. But we've seen, of course, China increasingly flex its muscle in the region in recent times. And, when you throw that into the mix of the pandemic and all the other geopolitical challenges, I suppose what's important to remember is that Korea and Queensland, we are classic, we are middle powers, similar size economies, but in terms of the bilateral relationship, it's underpinned by shared interest, similar values. What is unique to Korea is that it is the only Asian trading partner where we have fought shoulder to shoulder alongside them, in the Korean War. So the bilateral is underpinned by these similar values, and that of course spills over into business. It spills over into education, to everything. So look, I think from where we sit, we see much more potential in the years ahead for Korea and Queensland to do more together. And I think, again, for those of you that are looking to diversify your strategy in terms of student recruitment and other things, again, I think now is a really good opportunity to have a first or a fresh look at the Korean market. So let me move on to the pandemic and its impact on Korea. Of course, much is spoken about, every country's curve. This is Korea's curve as at yesterday. The blue line is the daily rate of new confirmed cases. And as you can see, Korea has been one of the few countries that suffered a significant outbreak of domestic local transmission, as you can see here in the end of February, early March, but has been able to contain it. And as you can see, in the last 2 months, there's been a significant flattening of the curve. And in the last month, from early April, the number of new cases every day has been in and around the 10, and actually in recent weeks in the single digits. There has been a little small outbreak over the weekend associated with a cluster from a few nightclubs in Itaewon. I think we've had about 126 new cases in the last 5 days. And so you can see that small uptick there in the last day or so. And this is the sort of summary of the latest statistics. And what you can see is a huge kind of a recent blitz on the number of tests which have been undertaken as a result of that little outbreak from that cluster in Itaewon. But overall, where Korea sits, there's just a little bit under 11,000 confirmed cases in total, with 258 casualties. And so it's quite a remarkable story, particularly, when you consider where Korea sits now vis-a-vis other countries. This slide is quite horrific when you look at it. But it felt for us in Korea, it felt for many weeks, Korea was ranked number 2 for such a long period of time there. But this is where we sit as at yesterday. Korea is now ranked 41st, Korea 50. So look, I think the message is that, of course, we really sincerely hope that perhaps after New Zealand, that Korea is perhaps one of the first in the first tier of countries that emerges out of the pandemic, alongside Australia. But of course, what this slide does show you, I suppose, is where we sit, that is Australia, relative to some of our historical competitors when we're talking about the Korean student market. So look, relatively speaking, we're faring very well, and so that is, quite encouraging. Albeit, I acknowledge the situation, and none of us are out of the woods yet. In terms of the impact on the Korean economy, it's been quite brutal and it's been quite sudden. Here you can see just with exports, they've dropped, 24% in the last month. That's been the largest drop in about 8 years. The trading balance for the first time in also about 15 years, there was a trade deficit. I suppose the impact here, of course, I mean, the significance of this, of course, is that Korea is a trading nation. It's the 6th largest exporter in the world. Exports make up, close to 50% of its GDP. So, this, of course, the impact of the pandemic on, Korea's trading partners will continue to impact the Korean the economy. Having said that, the IMF are forecasting Korea's GDP growth in this calendar year to be 1.2%, which, relatively speaking, it isn't so bad. In terms of unemployment and youth unemployment, what you can see here is that sort of the pink line is Korea's unemployment rate. I mean, it's still relatively low, but what you have to keep in mind is the Korean labour market is very inflexible. It's very difficult to sack workers even in these times, and even in the GFC, the unemployment rate only got as high as 5%. But I think what I want to focus on is the youth unemployment, which again the official rate is sort of hovering around getting close to the 10%. But for many years now, the unofficial rate of youth unemployment in Korea has been incredibly high, and in some of the regions it's as high as 30%. And there are many structural and societal reasons for that. But when President Moon was first elected back in 2017, I mean, it was so serious then that he described Korea's youth unemployment as a national disaster, and he even referred to this generation as potentially becoming a lost generation. I mean, since then, things have only actually got worse, right? But this is why, TIQ Korea, we've really focused in on this and across the 4 subsectors. I suppose, yes, more proactively focused on the youth unemployment and in particular vocational education and training. And yes, I'll just touch on a little bit more around our strategy and where we've sort of focused our efforts in recent times. I'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. But in terms of, I suppose, the various scenarios as we come out, I mean, of course, everyone's talking about, whether it be a V, a U, a W, or some other letter of the alphabet. I've stolen these kind of different scenarios from McKinsey & Co. I think most pundits are suggesting that Korea, it's more likely to be this A1 scenario, where there is likely to continue to be some continued outbreaks, but Korea has demonstrated its ability to contain it. What's incredible, they've been able to do it without shutting the borders, and they've been able to do it without painful, lockdowns. So, arguably right now, there are far less restrictions on life in Korea than they are here. But again, as we've seen over the weekend, small little outbreak. But I think there is quite a high degree of confidence across the community that the governments, but also the health system, can handle any outbreaks, as they arise. But again, given how inextricably linked the Korean economy is to its trading partners overseas, we expect again the recovery to be somewhat muted. In terms of student numbers and for Queensland, again, I think most of you, I imagine, are quite familiar with the stats. I mean, again, Korea is our 4th largest source market, so it's still very important. How that number is broken down, the 7,000, as you can see, there is a majority that relates to vocational education and training, and again, a lot of that is as a result of this soaring youth unemployment in Korea. the 7,000, I mean, we've come off slightly, I think 3% from the year before, but you know, still relative to how we're traveling against, in terms of the trend against other states and territories, we're doing pretty good. Again, SA have increased, NT have increased, but it's off a very small and very low base. In terms of how it's broken down by subsector and over the last 4 years for Queensland, again, this slide touches on that. Higher ed, it's great to see it kind of bounce back, or starting to bounce back. And look, I think anecdotally what we've seen is a renewed effort from many of our universities in terms of their focus in the market. And so look, it's a cliche, but it's so true. You know, the more time you spend, face time you spend in market, it will, you know, bear fruit. And that's the same that to be said for the school sector, where, you know, our colleagues and cousins from EQI have been, again, very consistent and focused on, again, spending time in market. And that the school numbers, again, certainly bucked the trend in terms of other states across the country. These are some of the key fields of education, again, from the Korean student enrolments last year. So again, I think most of this will be familiar to you. But I suppose what I just wanted to now just spend a little bit of time on is the strategy that we've had in TIQ Korea over the last, you know, 4 years. I think historically, when it comes to the IT sector, I think, you know, we've been really focused on our relationships with agents, and that's, again, they are such an important stakeholder, and again, we acknowledge the great work that the agents, education agents, do, and so I suppose we certainly, as part of our strategy, we want to continue to embrace and work closely with education agents as a very important channel to market in Korea. But I suppose what we decided to do a few years ago now is really try to, you know, in parallel, start to go direct and work with key partners in Korea, and that's at a G to G level. So, you know, historically, you know, we had the sister state relationship with Gyeonggi, the terrific sister city relationship between Brisbane and Daejeon. But I think what we wanted to do last year, in the last few years, is really try, as government, to try and build those G to G relationships with, you know, our key partners in Korea. So we've looked to, you know, actively collaborate with, you know, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Employment and Labour. We've been able to actually formalise collaboration agreements through MOUs and SOIs with a number of offices of education at both the provincial and city level. So we haven't kind of just, you know, we've kind of broadened out beyond our sister state relationship with Gyeonggi. And we've also looked to, you know, embrace some of the key councils or association like KCCE, which is responsible for administering many of these sort of global internship programs, particularly for the vet sector. So we've tried to, again, build and leverage these G to G relationships for the benefit of, you know, our partners in Queensland, as you know, for a number of their, you know, global internship programs, etc. But the other thing we've tried to do is really foster closer B2B partnerships, and it's been with a view to try to explore, you know, new delivery models, including the delivery of content offshore in Korea, and that was really the genesis or the thinking behind the Study Queensland Week in Korea, where Minister Fentiman led a Queensland vet mission to Korea, where she led a delegation of both private and public vet sector players in market, where we really try to foster, again, those B2B relationships. And, you know, we got a lot of really great traction, and there has been, you know, what's been encouraging is, you know, some really good tangible outcomes from that mission. And in response to that vet mission in 2019, Olivia led a reverse mission of key stakeholders from Korea, from both offices of education and some vet high schools, to Queensland earlier in the year. And I want to again shout out to those partners of ours in Queensland that helped support this mission. It was extremely well received, as many of you know. Again, seeing is believing. So for these key stakeholders from Korea to really literally kind of roll up the sleeves, get their hands on, understand that really kind of that holistic experience, understanding the embedded nature of our vet sector with industry, understanding the pathways, was extremely valuable. Luckily, we just snuck this in before all the travel restrictions were implemented. So, but yes, this is something, and this reverse mission was a great success. And again, I want to just acknowledge everyone who helped pull that off. I'm going to leave my comments there, but hopefully, I suppose my point is, in terms of as we look forward and as we look to help you position for the recovery, I do want to encourage you to consider, maybe new ways of engaging with the Korean market, and whether that be, new delivery models, whether that be through new partnerships, whether it be new channels to market. Again, we're very keen to explore those with you. We certainly welcome any ideas. But again, I'll now hand over to Olivia, who will touch on, again, some of the latest developments in market. So let me introduce Olivia. She's actually, again, studied Queensland's BDM in Korea, based in Seoul. She's been with TIQ actually, as of last month, she celebrated her 10-year anniversary with Queensland. So she's a great asset to Queensland. Most of her time has been spent in the IT sector. So again, a great experience, terrific knowledge of both sides. She's really acts as a very effective bridge between both sides. And again, for those of you that haven't yet connected with Olivia, I certainly encourage you to do so. So I look forward to questions at the end, but in the meantime, Olivia, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Hello, everyone. It's very good to be reconnected with everyone, and especially those who haven't been really active communicating with myself. So I will touch upon how Korean government has responded to this coronavirus situation. Every Korean schools from kindergarten to university open their new semester, new year on 2nd of March. But this year, of course, it has been delayed, and online program has been started since 9th of April in stages for the primary to high school students. Was about to start coming back to classroom in phases from 13th of May, which is today. But because of the recent outbreak of COVID-19 in Itaewon Club, it has been postponed again by 1 week. So it's going to be next Wednesday, starting from year 12. So this is the first time they postponed every classes nationwide. For university entrance exam, which is relevant to some of the universities in Australia, the CSAT exam, which is College Scholastic Ability Test, has been postponed by 2 weeks to 3rd of December this year. And so it would be worthwhile to remember this date for those of you acknowledge Korean CSAT for the entrance. IELTS has been partially open, and while TOEIC has been cancelled for the last 2 months. For university college and universities, more than half of private universities resumed offline classes last week, but it's mostly for practical classes only. It is recommended to have offline classes for practical classes first, especially for university colleges. For those of you who are not familiar with university college and university, so university college in Korea is quite equivalent to vet institutions in Australia because they provide more, they focus on developing students' practical skills, while universities focus on enhancing the academic background and knowledge. And university college provide associate degree for 2 to 3 years, while university provides 4-year bachelor's degree. And recent announcement is Korean government will provide relief fund to every people, Korean people. So to backfill that budget, Ministry of Strategy and Finance, who allowed funding for Ministry of Education for some international projects, and they will discuss whether they should withdraw government funding, which is already approved for the Big Four international project this year. And this includes Global Internship Program for University, Global Internship Program for University College, and Blue Ladder Program. I will touch upon this again later on. Because university and university colleges has been running online classes in March and April, there is a strong demand from Korean students asking full or partial tuition fee refund. And if we look at the Blue House website, there's a number of petitions coming from students asking the partial fee refund. So I know this is not the case in Australia, but in Korea there's a strong demand. And Ministry of Education and Korean Council for University Education are discussing that some of the funding already available will be maybe used as a scholarship to refund some of the tuition. So there are a number of government funded programs which is actually mostly still available, but it just cannot be executed because of the COVID-19 situation. So many Korean government or offices of education are just waiting for the situation gets better so that they can practice and send students to Australia and overseas. For instance, the most popular program that is run and funded by Korean government is Global Internship Program. And Global Internship Program is available for high school students, university college students, and university students. But most popular one is for the programs for vet high school students and university colleges. Because Global Internship Program itself is to provide students with overseas field experience. So it should be include internship experience, whether it is paid or unpaid. Mostly it's unpaid. And Innovation Support Initiative for University Colleges is another popular program for Korean students. It's also funded by Ministry of Education, and it used to be consist of ELICUS, which is English component only, but starting from this year, Ministry of Education announced that unless this program includes in field experience or observation or internship, they will not fund. So that means with growing youth unemployment rate in Korea, government want to provide more opportunities for Korean students to have field experience in overseas to develop their capabilities. So this Innovation Support Initiative is also for includes internship, and Blue Ladder program is also funded by Ministry of Education, and vet teachers NCS benchmark program. So Korean vet industry have adopted National Competency Standard Program, which is NCS, and that benchmarked Australian qualification framework. So some provincial office of education sent their vet teachers to Australia and Germany to benchmark those programs. You might already have heard K-Move School, which is funded by Ministry of Employment and Labor. This has a short-term and long-term program, and this provide also the Korean students with overseas experience, working experience. So these are government-funded program in table, you can see. For those here, Link Plus SCKWCC is now no longer available, but some of the university colleges already got funding under this project and still utilizing this funding. And now these 3 programs are integrated into innovation support projects. As a outstanding program, I can show you the example of global internship program for VET High School and University College. So the duration is quite different. VET High School students join the global internship program with tourist visa. So Korean students can stay in Australia up to 12 weeks. So that's why the long-term VET High School global internship program is 12 weeks, while University College provides 16 weeks, which is equivalent to 1 semester in Korean University College, so that they can get that credit back to their university college. GIP for VET High School is evaluated by Provincial Office of Education, while University College students program is evaluated by KCCE. And funding source is a little bit different. Starting from this year, GIP for VET High School cannot get funds from Ministry of Education because Ministry of Education think that GIP for VET High School is mature enough to run by themselves without government funding. For VET High School students, it has ELICOS and VET components plus internship at the end. It has VET component because we think that VET High School students have relatively shorter experience and knowledge in VET sector, while university college students already have learned VET component at their university college for at least 1 year, and they also have internship experience in Korea. So normally GIP for university college does not include VET sector. This is just an example of the potential pathway for Korean VET High School students, because I think the two issues is very important. Then you will get some questions from Korean potential students or parents or schools if you participate at the education fair in Korea. So one would be relevant to employment. So student will ask, can I get a job after studying in Australia? And another one is there any legitimate way to study and live further in Australia? So we cannot guarantee, of course, it's student's ability and depending on the visa situation, but this shows the example of how the students who have joined the Global Internship Program can further study and live in Australia. So I just encourage you to get your head around this kind of model. For another government funded programs for higher ed and ELICOS and school, actually most of the programs have ELICOS components because English is not our native language. For higher ed, there are programs such as Prime Project and ACE Plus. When Korean institutions approach to Australian institutions, they wouldn't say that it's funded by Prime Project or ACE Plus, but many of projects are that the Korean institutions are utilizing their funding got from Ministry of Education under Prime Project or ACE Plus. For ELICOS, we do have English Teachers Overseas Training Program funded by Ministry of Education. So this is for teachers for middle school, and the whole program is 6 months, and 5 months is taught in Korea, and another last 1 month is done in overseas, and Australia is one of the popular destinations to study. So under this program, English teachers will go to overseas and have up to 2 to 3 week TESOL training program, and followed by 1 or 2 week practicum at actual schools in Australia. So that's another opportunity. And for school sector, short-term study tour is very popular. For this year, as the school program has been postponed for all the schools, we expect the summer vacation will be shortened and maybe winter vacation as well. And this could affect the opportunities for short-term study tours because normally they travel to overseas for the short-term study tour program during their vacation, but not all the cases. I know that with current situation, online delivery model is very, very popular. I just want to mention how online class or delivery model is recognized in Korea. So generally speaking, online classes is not as highly valued as face-to-face classes. That's why Korean university students are asking tuition refunds. So if Queensland institutions can provide some of the advantage in tuition fee, that can be an attractive factor to attract Korean students for online classes. Based on the subsector, there is plus and minus for online class. For instance, VET is quite difficult to deliver the classes online because it's mostly about practical things, while school is also difficult because school study tour is all about experiencing the culture and mingle with local students in Australia. But I would say that doesn't mean that there's no opportunity. So some programs, combination programs of online, offline can be an opportunities. For instance, ELICAS can be done in online, while VET can be done in overseas once travel ban is lifted. Or for instance, one of the offices of education in Korea is looking for partnering with overseas schools and keen to look at Australia market with a little time difference. And their target is to have the sister school relationship with, it can be primary, middle school or high school. And then they can set up a topic and do the research or research projects all together with Korean students and Australian students. And that Ministry of Education, Office of Education is planning to run a youth international forum in Korea, so they can invite some students from partner schools in overseas so that they can come together and present what they have researched and experienced on that topic. So, and another example would be the education fair. So I know that one of the Korean agency here in Korea is running offline face-to-face education fair this weekend, and they will connect some of the Australian institutions online during their offline face-to-face education fair. So it can be a combination of online, offline thing like this. And as you know, the education agencies is still, Korea is a very education agency driven market. So in that way, maybe you can be connected with education agencies and still participate at the education fair with this situation. So these are what I would like to deliver. And as Daniel mentioned, I'm very open to have a diverse conversation with you further based on my presentation and discuss further opportunities with you. I will hand over to Candice for any Q&As that you might have, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. Thank you. Over to you, Candice.
Thank you, Olivia and Daniel. I'm Candice. I'm also a member of the Study Queensland team based here in Brisbane. So as Olivia said, we will now move to the question and answer session. If you do have a question, please type it into the Q&A box, and Olivia and Daniel will endeavour to get through them during this session. I might start with the first question, and I might throw this one to you, Daniel. What are the key factors influencing Korean students' decision on where to study abroad and who with?
That's an excellent question, Candice. So look, I think historically, most of you will know that Korean parents, Korean students, their first thoughts when it comes to their education, their first thoughts run to the States, the US. Um, um, Probably next is the UK. We're probably in the second tier alongside Canada, maybe less so New Zealand. But this is the thing. So it's I wouldn't say we're front of mind. and then the other thing is Queensland itself. This is not just limited to the IT sector. This is business generally. Queensland itself doesn't really have a brand in Korea. While many Koreans might be familiar with some of our iconic cities or tourist destinations like Great Barrier Reef or Gold Coast, etc., Queensland itself doesn't really have a brand. So I think for us, as most of you are aware, I think the important thing initially is to come under that Team Australia banner, really position Australia first, and then look to kind of effectively position Queensland and our unique value propositions as part of that, as part of the equation. But I think, again, one of the things which we've really tried to do in recent years, and I think has become even more important now post-pandemic, is to really develop these direct relationships, if not partnerships, with the offices of education, many of whom are again under significant strain and stress. And when I think about the likes of a Sejong City Office of Education, Sejong is now the new administrative capital of Korea. I mean, their population has just boomed, but the education, the schools just haven't been able to keep up. The Office of Education is under enormous stress and pressure. And so being able to, for the Office of Education to be able to reference their partnerships with the likes of, Study Queensland and some of our providers in Queensland, provides them this opportunity to really sell to parents and attract, new families to their city. So I think my point is that we've still got a lot of work to do in terms of building and continue to build and then enhance our brand in terms of what Queensland and Study Queensland has to offer. I think there are many great examples where Queensland has, we've been able to make a real tangible difference in these student lives. And so I think, Olivia and I, it's one of those things, the more case studies and successful case studies we have across the different subsectors, the more testimonials that our partners can develop, whether they be written or video or whatever. It's absolutely, this time is a great opportunity to go back, embrace some of the alumni. If you want to do business in Korea, if you want to try and continue to attract students from Korea, I think going back and showcasing some of those really successful stories, that success will breed success. So hopefully that answers your question, Candice. But I think the other thing which I will just touch on quickly is employability. There is still this, unfortunately, this perception in Korea that, with the high youth unemployment, well, what do you do? Oh, well, look, we're going to hold out for these jobs in the conglomerate groups that are arguably paying more than, say, the SME sector. So what do? We're going to go back to university and get another degree, and hopefully that'll boost our ability to get a job. But of course, we all know in Queensland, we've for many years now, we've focused more on the employability, more on these practical skills. And that's the thing, again, in Australia, the percentage of international vet students that get work, it's as high as 82%. The starting salaries for our international vet students in Australia, again, is something like 41 grand, which is incredible when even when you convert it back, and with the Aussie dollar battling the way it is. These are amazing outcomes. These are the things we need to, again, continue to be effectively kind of communicating, with our partners and with the parents and with the, policymakers in Korea. To the extent we can get Queensland data on those things like, the employability and the median salaries coming out on graduation, I would love to see it, because that's where we can then position Queensland. I believe Queensland would have an even better story than some of those national figures that come from ACPET. But anyway, I'll leave it there for now, Candice.
Thanks, Daniel. And we do have a question that is related to what you were just discussing from Anya Olympia about the youth unemployment rate. And her question is, are there really fewer jobs available, or is it solely, as you mentioned, that the youth are holding out for more professional jobs? Okay. And there are actually jobs available.
Okay, great question. Thanks, Anna. I mean, I think actually, without wanting to start on blatantly, but I've actually written an article which was published on my LinkedIn and was picked up by Korea Times, which addresses this very complex kind of subject. But in a nutshell, it is complex. There's the societal and there's the structural issues which have led to such high youth unemployment. Yes, there are less jobs because, the conglomerate groups, again, to the extent that Korea's aging the fastest in the OECD. So, the previous government extended the retirement age. And so for every vice president that stays in a job, probably keeping half a dozen, graduates out of a job. So there is that fundamental problem. But again, it's just this perception issue. There's a perception, again, across society where everybody there's this kind of universal dream to jag a gold collar job, doctor, lawyer, or a white collar job. So just the perception of it is just fundamentally challenged. But this is what I'm saying is when you look at the starting salaries at Samsung Group, when you look at starting salaries at Kakao even, or even Coupang or Naver, some of these new kind of emerging businesses they're quite comparable to the starting salaries of our international vet students in Australia. So I think now, again, so I think that, again, this is the opportunity for us if we can articulate these outcomes we're achieving, and then how we're achieving them. I think will stand us in really good stead in the months and years ahead.
Thanks, Daniel. Next question for Olivia. In your presentation, you explained a series of government-funded programs, and as you mentioned, they were very much based on providing internships and practical experience for Korean students. You mentioned the Global Internship Program, which had previously also been funded by the government of Korea, and you mentioned that it was no longer being funded. Is there still appetite for this program among students, even though it is self-funded? And if so, what are the favoured sectors?
Okay, thank you for the question. For the Global Internship Program for vet high schools, previously, before Ministry of Education cut their funding for this program, I mean, MOE's funding for GIP for university college students is still available for 400 students per year, but for vet high school students, that Ministry of Education stopped funding from this year. But apart from that funding, the funding from each city or provincial office of education, which is under Ministry of Education, is still available. And some schools, vet high schools, or city or district, let's say like Gangnam district, they are still open to fund for this program. So there's a strong demand still for this global internship program for vet high schools. And the example of this is one of the supervisor from Provincial Office of Education joined recent vet mission to Queensland recently, and they opened the application for the global internship program for vet high schools this year. and 7 schools out of 35 was selected and approved for the funding for the Global Internship Program to send their students to Australia this year. They are just waiting for the travel ban being lifted so that they can send students to Australia. And they're targeting the end of this year. So the demand from Korea side is still strong for that Global Internship Program. And it doesn't really matter whether the Ministry of Education cut their funding, because the funding from Provincial Office of Education is still available.
Oh, okay, interesting. And so you mentioned that there is still demand for this program.
Yeah.
Have you seen, with regard to sentiment among Korean students, is there less of a desire to study abroad due to, the pandemic situation at the moment?
You mean less desire?
Yes. Are they still enthusiastic about studying abroad, or do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a negative effect and students are more looking within the country to study going forward?
Okay. From the latest survey conducted by IDP, they said more than half of Korean students who was planning to study overseas is still positive in studying overseas. They just deferred their program in overseas. So I can say that there's still growing demand for studying overseas from those who have planned to study overseas. It doesn't really stop them. Yeah. Well, yeah. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I mean, there's still a very strong demand. I mean, with youth unemployment at again, it's as high as unofficially as high as 30%. It's really tough. It's really tough for the young kids today in Korea. There's not a lot of hope actually. And what's really really sad is just also there's their ambitions are being crushed. And these kids who have done everything right, they've done everything everything they've been told to do their whole life. These are even some of these students who have come out the other side of this pressure cooker environment that is the Korean education system. They've even those that have gone in the top tier universities, the Sky universities, come out the end with a degree. They can't get work. I mean, so I mean, I think the demand to get abroad to be able to secure work, meaningful work, the demand is still very strong. But of course, they're not going to risk their health. So as soon as it's as soon as it's safe to do so. I think from the students the demand will be there. I think similarly from the policymakers, both the Office of Education, but then also the cities. I think equally, they acknowledge the benefit of partnering with Queensland, particularly in providing these practical experiences and these work placements, because again, it's just not structured in that same kind of embedded way in Korea. I will just maybe just say, Candice, because the question has come up again around the online. Look, I'm the first to admit that, of course, from a Queensland perspective, we believe, of course, that we've got this depth of experience in delivering courses online, that we have this kind of agility around our teaching, and the learning experience is still a very high quality and rich experience. And I'm probably, so I believe it, but the problem is the Korean perception of that, of online learning. There's just simply not the same value attached to it as there is the offline. I suppose my point is, if you're sitting here in Queensland, you're thinking, well, maybe I can just pivot to online and as a way of, saving my business, or it's not going to be as simple as that. I think in Korea, many students use online already to supplement what they're doing, whether it be through, you know, all the Hagwon, the extension classes. I mean, a lot of that's delivered online. It's typically kind of one way, but arguably most courses are delivered one way. But I mean, Korea with its, you know, internet penetration rates and its, you know, it's super fast speeds, they already doing a lot online. But the problem is they just don't value it. And as you can see, even in Korea with the domestic universities, there's just this expectation that there will be enormous, you know, big discounts. So I come back to the point I was making earlier, is that I don't think just a switch online is going to, it's not as simple as that. I think with this pandemic, I think what Olivia and I are really encouraging everyone to do is we really need to have an open mind and explore new ways of engaging with the Korean market, with the key stakeholders here, and thinking about new ways again, yeah, to deliver course content, to attract students, support, and, you know, educate these students.
Thanks so much, Daniel. One final question for Olivia, please. Could you please provide more information on the industry sectors which Korean students would prefer for internships? So hospitality, tourism, IT. Over to you.
Yeah, that really depends on what they're studying right now. The hospitality, well, cookery, welding, tiling, healthcare industry is one of the popular sectors preferred from Korean side. Recently, there was a demand from art, including acting and filming. But traditionally, yes, hospitality, cookery, what else? Engineer stuff. Those are the popular study areas from Korea.
Yeah, I think where they perceive there's the high likelihood of work at the end of it, and you know, reasonably well paid work. I think that's kind of, if they work backwards. And so I think Olivia and I have been trying to line up those sectors where there is that the job demand in both countries. So of course, yes, like nursing, aged care, you know, I mean, again, huge demand on both sides. But look, even in, you know, commercial cookery and, you know, automotive, welding, tiling, these strong demand on both sides. So I think ideally we don't want to, from the Korean side, it's much easier to sell to the Korean side to be able to explain that there is the ability of the students to come back and work and get meaningful work, as opposed to just this massive brain and talent drain that'll just, you know, that will leave and never come back. So I think we believe it's most sustainable to look at those sectors where there is that job demand, industry demand on both sides.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel and Olivia, for your valuable insight today. So, Study Queensland, we're committed to working with international education and training providers, offering support in market re-entry into Korea and across our global network. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you'd like any further information. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you next Wednesday at 1 p.m. for our webinar on China, challenges and opportunities from COVID-19. You'll find the registration link at the bottom of the slide that you can see now. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.